Hello and welcome to the penultimate episode of Music Mates, the podcast where I pick two albums from each year in the 90s, apart from 1992, Music Mates 70s, this episode and the final episode, and we talk about them. Today we're coming close to the end of an era, and when we're done with this episode we'll only have the final one left in the series. This episode is almost a rite of passage. To get to Kasabian and Led Zeppelin we have to listen to this album. This album is very necessary though, so far I've only picked albums I like a lot, giving a rating of 8 or above. However, I've picked this album to give some kind of contrast between the great and the pretty bad. The album in question, released on the 22nd of June 1999 by new metal rap outfit pioneers Limp Bizkit, is the second effort by the group. They're much anticipated by this band since their hype debut. The album we're doing today is Significant Other. But first, a bit of backstory. Limp Bizkit was founded in 1994 in Florida by lead vocalist Fred Durst and bassist Sam Rivers. Rivers' cousin joined soon on drums, John Otto, and then they found Wes Borland for the guitar, completing the original lineup of 4 members. Later on, their member DJ Lethal would join their group to make the recurring band what it is today. Limp Bizkit was actually discovered by a band in the same genre that I like more, in fact, called Korn. Korn's bassist, called Fieldy, got a tattoo from Durst when they were playing in Jacksonville, and they became friends. The next time Korn played around there, they got Limp Bizkit's mixtape and passed it on to their producer. Through this, they managed to sign their first label, and Limp Bizkit released their debut album, $3 Bill Y'all. By the time their second album came out, they were one of the leading voices in a relatively new genre called nu metal. Other acts such as Faith No More, Deftones, Korn, and eventually Linkin Park followed in a similar fashion from a genre perspective. When Significant Other came out, it debuted at number 1 along with the specific track Nookie, turning them into big stars. However, shortly after the album's release, the band received controversy for their role in the catastrophe that was Woodstock 99. Notorious for being a festival known for the riots and sexual assault cases that came with it, and Durst having been heavily criticised for egging on the crowd and inciting them to quote-unquote break stuff. When Napster took off in 2000, Durst became an advocate for online music trading. They then soon after released Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavoured Water, their next album. Around then, Borland left the group soon after, so they spent a long time looking for another guitarist to replace him. Results may vary came out in 2005 and was very disappointing, resulting in little commercial success. Borland returned and in 2011 Cold Cobra came out. The band hasn't really done anything since. And that's the intro done for this album. I think for this episode today, the way that we'll probably format it is instead of talking about every song in the album as its own individual part of the episode, we'll probably just talk about the album generally, just because I only listened to it through once. I don't plan on doing it again, and I don't think I know the album well enough to be able to talk about it at an individual level, and I probably think you three agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've listened to it more than once, and I still don't think I even have enough to talk about it from an album level, so this will be fun.
Oh,
well, how many times did you listen to it then?
I think I've probably gone through it all about twice.
I got through like 1.5 times
Okay, well,
before I fell asleep, and then we had to record the podcast. Anyway.
Yeah, that is more than us, Ethan.
Then definitely.
We listened to it once together whilst playing Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Jonathan, since you're the one who I think probably thinks the album is at least halfway decent, tell us a little bit about why you like the album. I'll bounce off of it.
Yeah, I think what it has going for it is a good sense of energy that propels it all the way throughout. And I think definitely with some songs, there's a good sort of balance between a kind of almost angry energy and some slightly more interesting like sounds being created, either through like the bass or something more, well, a little more experimental it feels sometimes. So it feels, I don't know, it creates some interesting interesting moments to sort of listen to, and bits to sort of I don't know, I've kind of failed already, running out of steam. Yeah, I think one of the songs that is, well, yeah, some of the songs that have vaguely stood out. So I'm Broke. That's one where there's from memory, it's got two reasonably distinctive bits, and I quite like the way it weaves between, well, I guess chorus and verse basically, and they're quite distinctive, but it still sort of works still in the same song. And there's sort of similar effect with End Together Now, which also has Method Man, where it's sort of those two almost in a call and response sometimes. I think that's something I'm a sucker for. It's just a kind of call and response that if done well, you can create a great energy throughout the song.
Yeah, I think that track in particular was one that jumped out to me, and I think Harry especially.
Yeah, it's the for me anyway. I think it's the best song on the album, to be honest, and that's not just because Method Man plays Cheese Wagstaff on the wire. So I like Method Man at the moment. But yeah, that definitely. I guess that Method Man is like a musician. I like listening to their kind of vocal delivery, whereas Fred Durst's voice is kind of very grating and annoying, personally.
Yeah,
So,
my thing with his voice is that the band has two. I feel like it has two textures that it goes through, and one of them is the instrumental one, and one of them is the vocal one. But for me, the problem with it is that there's this really large disparity between the vocals and the instruments in the songs. Then the music itself is quite heavy, and it has these metal vibes. As I mentioned earlier, it was part of a new genre that was kind of emerging out of the mid to late 90s called nu metal, which other bands were a part of. And it was kind of a mixture between, I guess, lighter heavy metal. I know that sounds kind of a stupid thing to say out loud, but also mixed with rap and other elements like that. The problem with that for me is that you have the instrumental stuff, which is really, really heavy. But when you combine it with the vocals, and his voice I find quite nasally and high-pitched, so when you blend the two together, it just sounds sort of ridiculous, and I can't really take it very seriously with most songs. That's my experience with Limp Bizkit.
I don't know. I think there's something kind of funny about this album, in a way that's like, not like, I don't dislike it, you know. Especially like, I think this is one of those things you definitely get from the 90s selection we've done throughout Music Mates. It's this like counterculture, like, yeah, pop music, that's shit, we're cool. And I think this really delivers that, especially because there's just a song that's just a rant that's about that. It's like, okay. And I think, I don't know, it's like, normally I find that stuff kind of like, okay, let's get this over with, you know. But I don't know, I kind of liked it in this. Like as Jono said, it brings enough of the energy to the point where you kind of buy it. It's like, yeah, we do need songs with passion in it. We do need Limp Bizkit instead of that disposable music. The one thing that I noticed, is probably like the only comment I have on this album, is that it's sort of like, it feels like it has this nice transition across the album from, I don't want to say generic, but like a more typical, like, as Ethan said, nu metal like sound in like the earlier songs, and then as it goes forward, it starts sort of bringing in more experimental, more like abstract kind of sounds, you know, into it. And it starts like working with that, you know, which I think is pretty neat. I think it's definitely interesting to listen to.
I would say that I get where you're coming from, but I might have a different experience if I was listening to this kind of music in the late 90s when it was more relevant and newer. But for me, I just kind of think it's trying too hard, and it just comes across really naff as a result. Because their music is trying to be really, really edgy, and when you do have a song towards the end that is a rant about how music is kind of dying and you need new voices, but then that's on it's on an album where that is the music that you're talking about. It comes across extremely self-indulgent for me.
It is. But I think the fact that it is trying so hard to be this like edgy, like I don't know, fucking teen music, right? I think there's something like endearing about it, you know. It's like, okay, you know, that's sweet in a weird way.
Yeah, that I'm not sure I completely understand.
It's like it feels like you've got like a son that's going through the like rebellious phase. It's like, oh, look at him, you know, he's all grown up. You know, that's what this feels like.
It's definitely for teenagers, like in specific people who are like 13 in 1999. So going back to this kind of music, it's just, I don't know, it's not great. It kind of sounds like parody music. It's just the whole like white rap rock. Just kind of reminds me of like in the scene in Step Brothers where they sing Boats and Hoes and like the Lonely Island and stuff. They have the same kind of delivery of like, I hit him in the ass, I get a free pass. That kind of
Dude, when are we doing the Mediate Music Mates band? When are we doing it?
Yeah, like in the album, there are certain songs that I was like, okay, this isn't bad, but they are like, if Jenny was saying, like the more kind of experimental and different ones. Whereas like the one with Method Man, who is a better musician than Fred Durst. But the majority of the album just kind of, I don't know, it didn't do it for me really.
Yeah,
it's a lot of like repeating the same line, you know, like saying Nookie a lot, letting you know it's just one of those days, you know, there's nobody like you. It's 1999, baby.
It's just one of those days.
I've written down a lot of the lines that they just repeat in a lot of the songs. There's an incredible one called Show Me What You Got, which me and Ethan are a bit obsessed with, where the first like 30 seconds of the song are just Fred Durst naming places in America, which is definitely my favourite song in the album.
Yeah.
It's like Jackson, Louisville, Rochester. Yeah. Anyway, that's a good song.
And that's kind of another thing for me, because it's one aspect to talk about how his voice is generally kind of annoying and doesn't contrast well with what's going on with the more hardcore elements of music, which is the instrumental sections. But I think when it comes to writing lyrics, he's just not very innovative. Or I don't think his lyrics stand out. I don't think there's any kind of... I don't want to say that there's not expression there, because obviously there is, and to say anything different would just be kind of a shitty thing to say about any musician or any artist. But I look at other artists that we've done on the band and their way of conveying their emotions and their feelings through words. I just think what they're able to achieve is something that stands out and is so much more memorable, and there's a real sense of poetry to it. I know I talk about these guys all the time when we do these podcasts, but that Nirvana album, Nevermind, we did at the start of the podcast, whether you think his lyrics are good or not, I really love them a lot. It's because when you listen to them, they paint a really, really vivid picture, I find, and I don't think you would get lyrics like Cobain's anywhere else, whereas what Harry was saying a minute ago, it feels like anyone could just come along and parody these lyrics, and because of those kind of parodies, you look back at a band like Limp Bizkit and you just can't take them seriously, because it almost sounds like they are being a parody of themselves. Because it's just, I just find this music really, really lame.
It's not even like Rage Against the Machine, where they have like an important political message. Like if Ethan was showing me bits from the music videos that they've done, and like listen to the lyrics, and it's just kind of like an anger for the sake of anger with no real kind of message or meaning. And it really is that like teen, you've got to rebel against your parents because that's just what you do when you're a teenager. Like I don't think there's any bold statements like, apart from like, this music these days is so bad, we need original artists like Limp Bizkit. That's like the sake of their political messaging.
Yeah, that was the feeling I got when I looked at some of the lyrics of like the first two songs, and I was like, I don't really need to bother about this, do I? And then just kind of let the sounds be in the background from then on, and just did not pay attention to anything he says.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, but I think I'm of the opinion that you don't need to take it seriously to have a good time with that. You know, it's just like, yeah, it is this dumb teen angst, like heavy kind of sound from this whiny guy. But I don't know. It's just so like, yeah, it's Limp Bizkit. What are you expecting?
It is very funny to be like, are you down with the biscuit?
It's so funny. I love it.
I mean, I won't lie and say that we didn't have fun listening to this, because we did have a good time playing Battlefront and having this on in the background. That was a pretty good experience. But I don't think it's enough, because I walked away from the album 15 or 16 songs, and nothing stays with you. It's just kind of something that you it's something that you listen to as part of a podcast because someone's made you listen to the album, rather than something you would listen to in your free time, like plenty of the other albums that I've done on this podcast, where you listen to certain sounds, certain vocal styles, and they'll stay with you for a really long time. They have a big effect on your life, I think. And this is just not one of those bands, for me anyway. I'm sure there are I know that there's plenty of people out there that really like Limp Bizkit. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that I used to look at, I didn't really do this often, but I think when I used to talk to people back at during secondary school who liked Limp Bizkit, the people that I knew and they told me what to listen to, the versions of those songs that I would listen to tended to be the ones from their live performances, and it just kind of astounded me like how many people would turn up. When they played at Woodstock in 1999, and you see their live performance of something like Nookie or Break Stuff, it's just, I mean, the sea of fans that they have is insane, and it's kind of crazy to think that they had such a huge fan base around the time that they were big, that they could attract that many people. So obviously they did something right in the late 90s, but the fact that most people wouldn't know who Limp Bizkit are 20 years later, whereas you could think of some really well-known rock bands from the 60s or 70s that have stood the test of time and people still listen to them really passionately and avidly 50 years later, you know?
Yeah, I think it definitely captures like that 90s energy of just being like mad as shit. But and this is going to be the most pretentious thing I've ever said on Mediate. You ready? It's not very deep. You just kind of get it. You're like, okay, you know, like once you've thought about it for like 30 seconds, you're like, well, I kind of understand it now, you know. But you're done with it.
Yeah, I guess that's a good sort of explanation why in the moment you can get immediately into it, and it's the sort of thing that wouldn't really then stand the test of time, whereas like in the moment you hear it and you're like, yeah, I am mad at shit for no apparent reason. Yeah, and then you'll very much sort of move on when you're like, huh. So yeah, I think Tony has definitely stepped on a good argument there of good point of it is so flat, basically. It is what it is, so easy to get into and then easy to forget and move on from, because it's not really going to stay with you.
But I don't think that's something that they were actively going for, because I don't think people really create music to be forgotten. So I think that's just a failure of the band.
I think that's their whole point is they don't like disposable music. That it's just like, we have listened to Limp Bizkit and then we're going to dispose of it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Do we have anything else to say, or is this going to be the most
I
insanely
think-
short?
I think we could wrap it up pretty soon. I didn't dislike listening to it. I don't find the vocals like super like offensively like whiny to me. I think there's enough energy that when it's on, I'm like, okay, But also at the same time, it's like, fuck. I'm trying to think about the album, and it's like, okay, when I listen to Depeche Mode's fucking Violator, I was like hyped for each song because each song felt like a thing, felt like it had like a character and like a reason to exist. In Limp Bizkit, there was some sounds that sounded like Limp Bizkit and a rant.
Yeah, there's another thing with that actually, is that it's actually quite difficult to tell when one song stops and another begins.
Yeah,
Like,
I
Harry
think
had
that's
the
it's
exact
neat that
same
it's got
thing,
smooth
yeah.
transitions, but it makes it feel like it's like
Well, often a song will be like 4 minutes long, and the first 3 minutes are one sound, and it concludes, and there's another minute which is a completely different sound. So I assume we're into the next song, but it's just like a disconnected kind of skip, but it's also like they're not telling any jokes. It's very strange.
they're just fucking with you at this point. But yeah, it's alright. It's alright.
I'm fucking with the biscuit.
Yeah, go. Freestyle rap, man.
I think also I would have liked it less if I could see what the songs were titled, because Ethan would like tell me, oh, it's called this, and I'd be like, oh, okay. Imagine that word in my head, And then I look at how Limp Bizkit spell it, and it just gives me a fucking headache.
You're
Alright.
talking about like 1999 and shit like that, yeah.
Yeah, we have to call this episode 1999 the way Limp Bizkit spell it.
Yeah, just fuck search engine optimization. To be fair.
Maybe that's why they died. It wasn't because the music was just so disposable. It was because they were so bad at spelling. It just killed the SEO.
Yeah. How the
People
fuck do
found
you
Google.
spell it? Is it limp? Limp is limp, right? But is it BIZKIT?
Yeah.
Is that it?
I think so.
Bizkit? Fuck.
Yeah,
Anyway,
B-I-Z-K-I-T, that's right.
That's interesting.
It's-
That's interesting. You would not know that from hearing it the first time. You'd have to ask
No.
to write it down, which is not a very teen rock thing. Alright,
Yeah.
we should probably put some scores on this, but we should have to do it in the shit rap rock style that they use. Who wants to go
Okay.
first?
You go first, then.
Fuck.
You're making us do
Fuck.
this.
I thought I would. Oh, I've kind of got to reap what I sow. Okay, yo.
Sheffield Leeds, Huddersfield.
Welcome to Limp Bizkit's song number 35. We're ending Music Mates. Is this the last episode of Music Mates?
There's one more.
Fuck, we're not ending Music Mates. I'm giving Limp Bizkit a 7. Yeah, let's gonna end this podcast before I have to go to bed at 11. Because I'm a teenager. Yeah. Anyway, someone else go.
If I've not gone first, then I'll go last.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go on, freestyle rap.
Alright. I'm giving it a 4. The album was poor. There you go.
Yeah. I came up with a similar idea, which it's just gonna be, oh, this album is sick. I'm giving it a 6, but Harry's was better.
You gotta get into the Fred Durst mindset.
It's just one of those days.
It is just one. Sometimes it do just be one of those days.
It's. Oh man, this is
Tony,
fucking funny.
just sometimes it is one of those days.
It's
Just one of those
It's
days.
just something you could just say.
Everyone has had one of those days, Everyone has had one of those days.
All right, Ethan. Come on, we've been waiting for this.
I mean, I'm not gonna freestyle rap at all on this. I'm just gonna give my honest opinion of the band with my rating, I'm afraid. So sorry about that. Let you guys down.
I'm afraid if it's not freestyle rapped, it automatically gets a 10 out of 10.
No, it's
Well,
all right.
that's
This could
quite a
just
big
be this
incentive,
could be in rant form, and we can lay like a beat in the background.
yeah,
Can you
yeah.
get Lust for Life by Iggy Pop back in while I'm talking about my thoughts for the album?
Get another copy.
Harry's editing this one.
So I picked Limp Bizkit because on this entire section of Mediate, I basically just picked album after album that I really, really, really liked. And it basically got to the point where, for this year, I wanted to either pick an album by the Chemical Brothers that I really like, or I think another Red Hot Chili Peppers album. But I didn't want to pick two albums by the same band because I didn't do it for Rage Against the Machine or Radiohead, so I wasn't going to do it for the Red Hot Chili Peppers either. And I also didn't want to pick another album that I liked. It's kind of like that donkey thing of he often gets the comment, which is, why do you only play games that you seem to just not like? No, why do you play games if you don't like them? And it's to have this sort of spectrum where you could compare things relative to one another, right? So that's why I picked an album that I knew I wasn't really going to like, and also because it's kind of a joke, Limp Bizkit. But having said that, I won't lie, it was quite fun to listen to, but it's not an album I would ever see myself re-listening to again for a really long time, if not ever. And when it comes, I think the last thing I'll say before giving the rating is that when it comes to what he's singing about, I don't really mind that it's not deep, because I feel like he's still singing about something that means something to him, and that's enough for me. I mean, whether he's singing about, I don't know, a broken relationship or whatever, as long as it's something that he cares about, then I don't mind, I'm happy to be there. But my main thing is that I fail to take that seriously at all, because I'm practically laughing the whole way through the album. And it's not really so much the fact that it is a comedy. I think it's the fact that it's unintentionally a comedy that makes me not really want to give it a high score. So I will probably give it a 4, just because I think it is a bad album. I wouldn't say it's good. So that's my final rating.
I think Fred Durst was cool for like 2 years in the same way Bart Simpson was like a countercultural icon for like 2 years before. But if you like look at that now, that like Bart Simpson was such a big like icon when he was just saying like "eat my shorts," and you look at Fred Durst with his backwards red cat, and you're like, this guy was cool once. Also, should we mention the fact that he like directed a film, and in the film he had some characters listening to Limp Bizkit and being like, "Yeah, Limp Bizkit," which is
oh my god.
Yeah, so we are too afraid to do.
He's in the car, the character's in the car with his son, and they go to the radio stations, and before he gets to Limp Bizkit, he turns to his son and he says, "You like a little bit of Limp Bizkit?" And then he puts the Limp Bizkit on, and that's what they
and he keeps
bang
going
their
like,
heads to.
"That is nice."
God.
Yeah.
Oh, Fred.
Yeah.
Fred.
It definitely does feel like a joke, but you know, at the end of the day, I'm laughing, right? And that's all that matters.
That's fair enough, huh?
That is fair enough.
It's just
Alright,
one of those
should we-
days.
Just one of those days.
Yeah.